Our speaker, Albert Ho, will be talking in just a moment, but if I say that at the end, it will be ample time for questions at the end, and we'll take the microphones round, so if you could wait till you've got a microphone, and then also announce your name and who you work for. So just in relation to the Chief Executive election 2012, I just want to say from a personal perspective, a couple of months ago I was reading the news at RTHK, and it was just at the time when Rita Fan was dithering, and so was Regina Ip. And the bulletins read something like this. You know, Rita Fan had discussed over a cup of tea with reporters whether or not she might indeed decide whether she was indeed standing for the Chief Executive. And then the next bulletin would be something like Regina Ip basing her decision on whether to become Chief Executive, not on whether Rita Fan would stand. But, you know, and on it went. And I remember thinking at the time as I was reading this inane stuff out, that I was thinking, when is this story ever going to get going? Well, I needn't have worried. Now there's so much colour to this election that even Silvio Berlusconi would be proud. Now there's been mudslinging and backstabbing. But one candidate who seems to have escaped all of that is our speaker today, Albert Ho, until now. So, Albert, for the sake of full transparency here at the FCC, can you answer honestly into the microphone? 1, do you own a jacuzzi?
Okay, you better ask all the questions before I answer it.
Number 2, does your wife have a magic door to Narnia in your flat that you're not allowed the keys for? And number 3, any secret love child stashed away?
Wow.
Here, quite seriously, to talk about Hong Kong's core values, please give a warm welcome to legislator, solicitor, leader of the Democrats, and chief executive candidate for 2012, Albert Ho.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Anna Mary, for your exciting questions. Do you have any photos to show to us about the lovely lady and lovely child? Now, if you don't have that, that means that there is no prima facie case for me to answer, right? So then I would exercise my right of silence. I think that is the safest way, neither to confirm nor to deny it. Okay, that is the safest way. But anyway, I know that there would be continued mudslinging in the times to come. Well, fortunately, at the start, I think in October last year, when I declared my intention to seek candidacy in the CE election, well, I made it quite clear in an honest and serious manner that I have no wishful thinking that I would be successfully elected at the end of the day. That looked a little bit silly for one, to join the race with such a mindset. But at least you can see the wisdom behind it. I can avoid all the mudslinging now, right? But apart from that, of course, I say this, in a very serious manner, because obviously, this CE election is not a genuine election. It is, in fact, an appointment exercise under disguise. I have to say that in all honesty. You see what is happening quite recently. If Henry Tang doesn't got the blessing from Beijing, I don't think he would have the guts and the courage to continue to run the race, right? And you see, whenever something happens, you would see all these pro-establishment candidates sneaking into the office of the Central Liaison, into the building of the Central Liaison office. During daytime or nighttime, they spend hours in secret meeting. So what is happening? So the inevitable conclusion is that this is entirely a game that is dominated by Beijing, and the result would be dictated by Beijing. I have to say this. And that is the purpose of my joining the race, is to expose all this. Now, I got my own mission, and I will seek to achieve certain goal in joining in this, I would say, farcical exercise of selecting the chief executive. Firstly, as a member of the pan-democracy camp, the Pandan camp, we got to seize every opportunity, seize every available platform to continue to demonstrate our continued determination and commitment to strive for democracy. Particularly, we must try to fight for the realization of true universal suffrage for electing the chief executive, the latest in 2017, and all the electoral members in 2020. Okay, we are fighting for that, and we must make use of this opportunity to try to force all the other candidates and also the incoming CE to show their view, to express their view, and to show commitment to ensure the public that the forthcoming election must be genuine. This necessarily means that the nomination of the CE, if the CE were to be elected on universal suffrage in 2017, as permitted, as shown to be permissible by the decision of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress in 2007, there is one important factor that we all have to bear in mind, namely the nomination process must be fair, must be open, must be inclusive, so that candidates from different political parties of different political persuasions can join the race. Now, this is essential. And secondly, by 2020, all the electoral members shall be elected on universal suffrage, and by that, it should mean that all functional elections shall be abolished. Now, this is the key objectives that we must try our best to secure an answer in the coming debates. And all the more, in the times to come, we have to fight for a one-off legislation to put all this in place so that we know how we are moving forward. Now, this is the most important point that I have to make in the coming debate. And of course, my joining the race with the support of the Pandan camp is part of an ongoing campaign for democracy. So there would be, I can tell you, continued actions in the street, in the community. There will be continued engagement in the electoral and at all levels to ensure that genuine, true democracy shall be put in place, by this timetable, 2017 and 2020. Now, this is the first goal. Secondly, the purpose of my joining the race is to show the unity of the pan-democracy camp. Although we all know that this is an exclusive exercise in that only 1,200 members in the small circle election committee can vote. But one of our goal in joining in this race is try to gain some experience in organizing a primary election among all the pan-democracy candidates. Now, initially, there were two persons, including myself, who have indicated an interest to stand in this election from the pan-democracy camp. Now, we know that we have to stand united. Not this year, not particularly this year, but most importantly, in 2017. We got to have one candidate from the pan-democracy camp, okay, to offer as a viable candidate and to offer an alternative government in the election. We can't afford to split. We can't afford to be divided if we really got a chance in 2017. So that's why we need to gain experience in organizing primary to ensure that we know how to sort out the differences and then find one candidate to run the election under the banner, one banner. And of course, by that time, we have to run with a cabinet. And I anticipate that if we have any chance of winning, then we have to prepare for ruling Hong Kong by a coalition government comprising the various political parties in the pan-democracy camp. So in other words, you got to be united. We don't have sufficient talents or resources to be sourced in one party. So we got to be united. We got to offer a coalition government. We ought to offer a cabinet next time, okay? But before we can go into that, we need to have a primary. So that's why this time we organize a primary, and with the support of the academic in Hong Kong U, we run this primary with electrical devices by this iPad, and we are very encouraged to have quite a successful result in that we have engaged about 3,000 Hong Kong U students, and they took part in organizing this primary, and we staged about 70 voting stations, mobile voting stations all over Hong Kong, and there were 35,000 citizens coming out to vote. Okay, so I would say it's immensely successful in seeing that people try very hard to try to engage, to take part in it, and that the pan-dem parties have stood united, and that is very encouraging, and that paved the way for us to prepare ourselves in unity in the times to come, in particularly get ourselves prepared for 2017. Now thirdly, this is very important, about nomination. I have mentioned to you about the importance of nomination. There have been a lot of worries and concern that the nomination committee to be set up under the basic law before 2017 would be structured in such a way as to screen out politicians of the opposition parties. Now that is the most worrying aspect, because the nomination committee has yet to be worked out as to how it is going to be structured. If by 2017 we can only have candidates from the pro-establishment camp, then even though it's one person, one vote, we won't accept that this is genuine democracy, because there is no competition, meaningful competition between the pro-establishment candidates and those from the opposition. Now, in 2009, and you can remember that Alan Leung, on behalf of the Civic Party, he stood for the election. He got himself successfully nominated. Now this time, I also got myself successfully nominated. So at least we can benchmark that that the present threshold is reasonable, or at least it's not unreasonable, okay? Because 2008, 2007, we have 2012, we have candidates from the opposition camp. So don't tell me that by 2017, it's too bad for the pandemic candidates. They are so poor in quality, they can't get into the race. Okay, then there must be something wrong with the structure. So benchmarking the threshold is important. So that's why I work hard to mobilize people in various sectors, including the social workers, the teachers, the lawyers, the accountants, to run to show that this is important. That we got to show that at least the present threshold should not be restructured in such a way as to make it more difficult. So this is another advantage. This is another goal that we have already managed to achieve, namely showing that nomination is important. We got to pay a lot of close attention as to how the nomination committee is going to be structured in the times to come. Now, finally, by this election, we would also like to demonstrate our vision and our competence in offering ourselves as a viable alternative to the present government. And this, we try our best to show that we have a very comprehensive election platform. Now, all this are on the internet. But very unfortunately, up to now, most of the reporters are not really interested in the election platforms. Not particularly about me, but even about Henry Tang and C.Y. Leung. There has been some reporting, but compare with other reportings on this mudslinging, and then there's all these scandals, it's hardly comparable. But of course, I'm looking forward to the forthcoming occasions where there will be open debates, and at least there will be 2 official debates to be organized, and I have been urging for the other potential candidates to join in forums for open discussion and interactive discussion on election platforms. But it seems that because of the nature of this small circle election, people know that platforms or programs are not really very important, because after all, it's the 1,200 persons within a small circle who are going to decide. And out of this 1,200, many people believe, as I'm told, that Beijing has in control over 700 votes, 700 to 800 votes. So they have a very high safety factor in seeing that the man chosen by Beijing would be elected. Now, personal integrity and credibility has now become an issue, like every other election. But if it is a universal suffrage, I think people facing such a personal, huge personal integrity issue would have to make a very hard decision to withdraw himself from the race. But unfortunately, that is the situation in Hong Kong. We still have to wait as to see whether there would be some incoming candidates. Some of them are very interesting, like Jasper Zhang. He is obviously a very experienced politician. He was the founding chairman of the DAB. He has been the president of the LESCO, so he has good knowledge about how the LESCO functions in the past, and of course, he has good relationship with the government. But of course, the problem is everybody thinks, and I believe that they have reason also to believe that he is a member of the Communist Party. So that is the question that he has to answer, whether or not he is a CCP member. And because our law clearly prohibits that that the CE prohibits the CE from having any party affiliation. And then after all, he has to disclose it. Now that would become a question of the image of Hong Kong, the reputation of Hong Kong. Now that is one question. And he is also very, as he said on the other day, that it would give public perception that the DAB would be very over-dominating, and then in the forthcoming legislative election in September, there's a lot of concern that there would be a swing back, and then DAB we have to pay a huge price for his decision, that sort of thing. But anyway, to me, I must make myself quite clear to avoid any misunderstanding. My only focus in this, in my job, as a candidate, is to clearly express the incessant demand of Hong Kong people for true democracy and for a more responsible and transparent government. I would put to all the candidates to answer the most sensitive questions about democracy, about preserving our core value, including the freedom of the press, the freedom of protest, the freedom of opinion, and to protect our high degree of autonomy. I would seek to challenge all the candidates to express their view as to whether the mainland officials should be criticized, for interfering into the academic freedom of Dr. Robert Zhong in undertaking his opinion polls. A whole lot of these sensitive questions would be raised during the debates, and I won't let any of them seeking to avoid it. That is my role. I am not interested at present to see who would eventually emerge as the winner. I think, from this, I won't have much expectation from the product of this small circle election. And I would like to see that this would be the last episode of this sort of absurd arrangement. And I think Hong Kong people, with all our, Hong Kong is such a progressive, such an advanced society, we deserve a much better system. That is a democratic system. And so that is the whole purpose of my, that is the most important message that I would bring out and continue to sound out in clear and loud in the coming debate. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thanks to Albert Ho there. As said, the staff will be bringing round microphones, so if you'd just like to raise your hands, if you'd like to ask Albert Ho any questions, and if you could say who you are and who you work for as well. So if people have got any questions, please. If you want to kick off.
Well, yes, I'm on. So, Albert, do you think CY can win?
I think only people in Beijing can tell you the answer. It's difficult to foresee the ultimate result. There has been lots of suggestion that an important decision has to be made when the Deputy President, Mr. Xi, who is entrusted with the ultimate authority of overseeing the Hong Kong-Macau affairs, is going back to Beijing, and he would be making the final decision. Now, Henry Tang is suffering from credibility crisis. Most people would find it difficult to accept that he would have the credibility to lead Hong Kong. I think there would be a strong reaction in Hong Kong. I think it's obvious. But Mr. Leung has also to answer questions about his involvement in the West Kowloon concept plan competition. You will remember that he was a member of the panel of judges, but eventually it was found that one competitor who managed to get into the final list was eventually disqualified because that competitor has disclosed that C.Y. Leung was their property consultant. Now, people have taken C.Y. to task for failing to disclose it, but he said that it didn't come to his notice because there have been a lot of these routine inquiries made with his firm about this sort of price quotation, but it is quite incomprehensible, and he would say that it's quite difficult to believe when the firm is being asked a question about West Kowloon, about the premium to be paid for the West Kowloon project, involving over $20 billion. And that premiums is in relation to hotel, commercial, and residential complexes. Is a very, very complicated question. And I don't think it's, anybody apart from the most senior members of the firm would be able to answer it. And I don't think any people would care to answer it if you don't know who is on the other side of the phone. And you won't even start to think about it if you don't sit together and seek more information and then give a careful consideration before you give an answer. So this is not a sort of day-to-day mundane, inquiries. So he's still got a lot to answer. But, for the time being, he enjoyed the benefit of the doubt. But tomorrow there would be a more discovery of documents about this West Kowloon project. So very unfortunately, all of them have question to answer. I don't know when would become my turn, when maybe when some photographs, were provided, but I'm left in the cold for the time being, fortunately. But for all these people, they have to answer it. And Jesper Zhang at one time told the public humorously that, of course, I have made my mistake, I have my own problems, but I got to face the music. So that's it. CY is possible. He got a high popularity rating in terms of support, although it appears that many big businessmen, prominent members in the election committee are not supporting him. And I was told that because of this mud-slinging campaign, the two camps, the Leung camp and the Tong camp, has become very divisive. So that is the situation.
Okay. Some other questions?
Tom Holland from the South China Morning Post.
Hello. Hi.
Mr. Ho, you point out that your overriding aim is to campaign for a full, free, fair election in 2017 with an open field of candidates. If we assume, and it's a big assumption, that you get that, what will the Democrats stand for then? What will you campaign for once you've given everything you're asked?
Of course, we got our own programs with regard to economic, social, cultural policy. Actually, I published quite a booklet containing all this. And all this, actually, every time when I attended these forums, I faced extensive questionings on each areas of policies, ranging from cultural policies, planning, and medical, education, and social welfare, and so on and so forth. Now, we have our blueprint for the future. But unfortunately, in this campaign, up to now, I will only say up to now, people are not really so interested. But maybe in the debates, there would be more debates, more focus on these areas. But we are getting ourselves prepared, and we have to put together our election platform and for more interactive communication with different sectors. Now, one advantage that I think I have derived from this exercise is that in the last 3 weeks, I have attended so many of these conferences and forums that I managed to get into contact with many people of different sectors. Okay, and I've been confronted, I've been challenged, and then of course, I encounter them with my answers, and I think that is important. Engagement is important. Now, so my short answer to your question is, we have to continue to be engaged. Our party has to continue to face, interaction, to face all sorts of inquiries, all sorts of questions, even all sorts of challenges from people who think that we are inexperienced of running an administration. Now, of course, that is a legitimate concern, but we got to face it, and interactive communication is important.
But perhaps you could give us a flavor of your policies. I mean, if we take, for example, Hong Kong's property market, housing prices.
Okay.
I mean, what would you do?
Okay.
How would you address what is clearly a
Yeah,
cause
yeah,
for concern among a huge number of people?
Okay, good. Now, actually, goes to the property, the land policy. And in fact, one of my campaign theme is to express my deep concern over the hegemony of big land developers. Now, I have offered a range of programs with regard to a more rational and comprehensive land and housing policies to be put in place. That, first of all, I have made it quite clear that we would not allow any favoritism to be displayed by government towards big business, land developers and business tycoons. Now, I say this because in the past there have been examples of this unfair transactions to certain developers. One glaring example is the Cyberport project, okay, which is offered to Richard Lee without tender, and there was a lot of complaints. There were a lot of complaints from the Developers Association. And then the West Kowloon project, the government once thought that it could be done by way of a single tender for the whole West Kowloon project. But eventually, because of their so strong oppositions, they then abandoned it. But still, this is something that we have to be very concerned to see that it must be fair. And then, of course, there are some other examples. Now, this is one thing. So to prevent collusion, to avoid suspicion of unfair advantage is important. Secondly, constant and more supply of land should be a policy. Now, in 1996, when the Housing Bureau was headed by the then Secretary for Housing, I forgot his name just then. There was a long-term housing strategy in Hong Kong, in that the government would always seek to accumulate land reserves for at least 5 years, such that the government would be in a position to control how much land should be put into the market every year. Okay, so they have accumulated reserves for at least 5 years. So they continue to form and accumulate accumulated land for this purpose, such that the government would be in a position to play an active role in the market, to make sure that when the market is facing huge deflationary pressure, that the government could, maybe tighten up supply for the time being. But when there is a bubble, clearly emerging, then the government can supply more land. So this this measure to prevent, to counter what we call economic cycle is important. Now, one other thing is all this big land, there has been suggestion that it's too big. It's only catered for big developers. So there has been suggestion that the land should be cut into smaller pieces so that there will be more competition within the sector of land developers. There will be more competition, and then that sort of thing. Now, one other measure about land supply is the policy to revitalize many of the industrial buildings, which are not put into beneficial use. And many of these are being used as temporary storage or even left vacant. Now, I think there should be more comprehensive and efficient policy to revitalize the use of these industrial buildings. One way is to facilitate the change of user, to modify the lease conditions, and to facilitate redevelopment if necessary. Now, so there's a whole lot of measure. Of course, the last point I would like to make is about the government's commitment to provide a certain percentage, to provide subsidized housing to ensure that those who are unaffordable would be given a reasonable subsidy. They can either get into the public housing flags, alternatively, if they want to own their own flag, but they find it unaffordable to go into the private market, then the HOS scheme should be introduced and should be, relaunched in such a scale as to make sure that it would facilitate the market and give opportunity for the younger generation to acquire property and to climb up the social ladder. And so, there's a whole lot of this sort of policies in my platform.
Hello. My name is Nelson Tang. I work in the finance
Nelson.
industry.
Yes.
Mr. Ho, let's assume if a first round of election
Yeah.
doesn't result in a majority and a second round of election is required, and unfortunately you're not part of the second round, how would you direct your constituents to vote in
Yeah.
the second round?
Thank you very much, Nelson. Well, actually, many of my supporters, there's 200 supporters, has a very fanciful expectation that we will become the kingmakers, right? Because in the first round, no doubt, or I will be kicked out. And then there will be, if the other two candidates, or none of the candidates, I will put it this way, manage to get more than 600 votes, then under the law, there would be a second round of voting. And then it's possible that our 200 odd votes would become the determining factor, right? If we swing our votes to either party, then we would make him the chief executive. But I can tell you, Nelson, this chance is extremely remote. And honestly speaking, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the chief executive would emerge upon the conclusion of the first round of voting. I think it's pretty clear. I don't think those in power would allow the pandemic election committee members to decide who is going to be the chief executive, and then and let us be in a position to impose terms on the possible candidate. I don't think that is going to happen. If the situation is so bad that that nobody is found to be a viable candidate to become the next chief executive, then it's more likely that no one will get it 600 votes, and eventually this election would be called off, and then there would be another election under the law, which is scheduled to be held on the 6th of May. But again, I think it's remote, frankly speaking. By the close of the nomination, I think the picture would be quite clear, as to who is going to stand, who are going to stand, whether Jasper Zhang is coming in, or so on and so forth. I don't know. But very unfortunately, very regrettably, the decision is not made in Hong Kong.
Okay, thank you very much to Albert Ho. We've just got a gift here. Oh, okay.
Albert,
Yes, Anna?
put your cards on the table. What's your prediction for the voting
What is the prediction, the voting of whom?
in the election?
Or the
No,
appointment
no,
process.
I'm not a prophet, and I'm not keen in predicting, and it's difficult to predict, frankly speaking. I
Well,
won't
have a
rule out the
guess.
possibility of either the wolf or the pig, winning in the election. I don't know, actually. But I know that the fat little boy is not going to win.
Thank you to Albert
Thank
Ho.
you, thank you. Okay.